minutes following the advanced screening of Twinless. Let us please welcome our special guests. First, James Sweeney, writer, director, Thank you guys for joining us. And congratulations on the film. It is out in theaters this So James, we as an audience take it for granted that a work of art, a film, just is. We just enjoy it. We take for granted what it takes to actually make. So give us a little background, tell us the genesis of this project. When did you start writing, and what were some of your inspirations?
Well, I've always been fascinated by twins. I wrote the first draft in 2015, but I'd say the formative inspiration was Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen.
Yep.
Sister, the parent trap. My parents can verify. I did ask for a twin for Christmas. I am still waiting to run into a long lost twin in the forest somewhere. I also dated an identical twin in my 20s, and I wrote the first draft shortly after he broke up with me. He's alive.
I had to watch the film a second time to really appreciate how skillfully woven the story is. There's so much to kind of into. For instance, it opens at the sandwich shop where Dennis and Roman first meet up after the support group, and where Roman says, "You get me." It's also where the film ends. Also in the opening scene, we hear the sound of the car crash, which is Rocky's death, then cutting to the funeral. Did you guys pick up on that from the beginning? It's easy to miss because it's just right at the start.
Yeah.
And this is also, the funeral is the first encounter between Roman and Dennis in disguise. Did you script all of these kind of narrative tracks, or was that something that kept evolving even through post-production and editing?
I'd say the script has evolved from very initial draft, writing and rewriting, so you write it once in script and again in filming and again in post. But I'd say like the structural skeleton that you see in the movie was laid in the shooting script. I think the biggest evolution of the screenplay was shifting the perspective. It initially was told entirely from Dennis's perspective, and then after Vidiots, my first film, Straight Up, which was also a dual protagonist film, I wanted to balance the perspectives more, which I felt lent itself to the themes of like subjectivity and objectivity we were exploring. But yeah, I'd say layering like the plants and payoffs was the most challenging part of making the film, but then also excising when we needed to cut out 50 minutes from basically pacing.
And what you referenced, the car sound effect in the beginning, that was an editorial exploration and decision. And at one point, there was a scream option. Too. There was a car crash and a oh! Not kidding at all. And we didn't go that one.
That was Christopher Petty who plays George. He had a wonderful scream.
It was really good. Yeah. It was like a Star Wars scream.
I have a question continuity. In the final scene with Roman and Dennis meeting, Dennis has a broken arm and a cast, which Roman notices, and he asks if the injury was the result of him being Dennis up in the hotel room earlier, to which Dennis says, unrelated, sort of. So in my mind, this goes back to the conversation between Dennis and Rocky under the sheets in Rocky's apartment, where Rocky says that since Dennis has just said that he's never broken a bone, that's now is going to happen. So when did he break his arm? When did he break his arm? Did I miss something when he broke his arm?
What do you think? Yeah, there we go. I mean, we get varying opinions. Some people think he's faking it. I've also heard from the hotel room. Fun aside. In the case of life imitating art, I had never broken a bone. But then when I was in Sundance, Mexico City, I got food poisoning, and I fractured my rib playing tennis. So now, much like Dennis, I've come full circle.
Well, for me, this moment kind of runs parallel to the story of Roman voluntarily breaking his foot to be the good twin, and because Dennis shows up as they reconcile at the end of the film, he then becomes the good twin, which then allows them to be in sync. You know, it's the first time that they, at the very end, that they speak together in the same voice. Because a few other times in the film, they're out of sync. You know, one will say to go, and the other says for here. But at that moment at the end, it's sort of the resolution. So that's my theory anyway. I also want to go back to that pivotal scene under the covers in Rocky's apartment. There's a line where Dennis says, "I must mend your broken twinship. My whole life I've been waiting for this moment." And Rocky says, "I think you'd be a good twin." And then, Dennis says quietly, "I'm falling in love with you." And it's kind of at that moment where obviously he's finding true love, but also certain validation for his fantasies about what a twin would offer his life. So talk a bit about that scene, because it's incredible the intimacy in how that was shot.
Well, I think something that Dylan and I felt, because that was our second day filming, because we did a split shoot schedule where we filmed all Rocky scenes, shut down for the holidays, and then came back and filmed the rest of the principal photography. So Dylan could have not just like an emotional shift and compartmentalization between roles, but also a physical. I mean, I'll talk about that, but we really cared about making sure that that scene between Rocky and Dennis, we knew that would establish the stakes, that the whole rest of the film was contingent upon this sort of snowball effect. I really feel like that was our day on set where we kind of felt like, oh, this is what the tone of the film is going to be.
Yeah, that was, we accomplished like so many things in the first 2 days in that sequence. Like we opened with the car hit, did some butt walking shots and stuff, and later that night, was it maybe that night that we did the Wonder, walk and talk when they first meet outside the diner, and then the next day we were doing the sex scenes, followed by like the second half of the day was the linchpin of the sequence, the emotional like part, and something that's the emotional through line of the story for Roman and the whole movie hinges on, and we had to be like rewriting it too at lunch. So yeah, it kind of weirdly was like, we did so many seasons of the film in the first 2 days, and it started us off on like such a brilliant foot. I mean, I remember feeling so good about them. Those first few days, and it goes a long way.
Talk a little bit about hitting the right, tone for these two characters, because they're strikingly different. And it took me a minute to realize you were the same person, you know, because there's so, you know, Roman is this kind of sad sack, you know, hot-headed. And Rocky is like stylish and confident and cavalier and went away to college and lived in Tokyo. So just talk about kind of the differences between these two people, despite the fact that they're twins.
Sure, yeah. Sad sack. Well, he's grieving. Sounds like how he always is.
No, he was over.
Just FYI. Well, yeah, I mean, I had a very clear picture of kind of Roman initially. And then, I don't know, it's something that just became such a huge focus and something that was very important for me was that we can play with the differentiations all we want, and that's really fun, and I feel like that wasn't what I was worried about. What I was more concerned with was that you could also still buy them being almost indistinguishable at one point, and now look at, you know, kind of the paths that they've taken. So yeah, I mean, in a weird way, I feel like the other stuff was made easy for me because the script was so beautifully colored in from the first time I read it, and so clearly defined. And then I had obviously so much help with, you know, the choices that go into everything that distinguish both of them. But I think the cooler thing about the story and seeing them separately in the way that you do as well, it breaks you to see like kind of that they never got that closure with each other, and that this thing happened at this point in their life where they didn't have that chance to have that resolution, and that you could see them, you know, as being one person at one point, you know.
Ashley, I want to bring you into the conversation. Marcy's character is kind of the conscience, you know, she's the innocent, and ultimately the spoiler who precipitates the unraveling of Dennis's charade, but she brings this fulfilling relationship to Rowan, and Rowan's kind of drifting away from needing Dennis. But I think she's also responsible for them being able to reconcile in the end, right? Because she has her own boundaries to say, I have a girlfriend's weekend, no, you can't come, and that kind of led to, you know, Rowan kind of saying, well, maybe there is a place for Dennis in my life. But talk about kind of hitting that character.
Yeah, I think what I really like about Marcy is that she's kind of the counterpoint to the grief and loneliness, and she shows that if you love someone, you don't have to excuse their bad behavior, like she doesn't with Rowan, but you can just hold their hand and very slowly kind of move through their grief and their loneliness, and she shows, I think, Dennis a lot of grace as well, when he's got his spikier edges, you know, and she sees that he's just lonely, all that he really needs is someone just to be a bit nice to him, which I think goes for everyone, really. We just need someone to be nice to us. I was a little bit worried, and so I was so glad that I didn't have James to trust. I wanted her to feel, yes, she's chirpy, and initially I think we think that maybe that's all that she is.
But she's not to be underestimated.
Exactly, but so I was thankfully able to have James kind of guide me in the tone of Marcy and making her feel something that people can maybe underestimate, and then as we move through the story, realize that just because she sees the world in kind of a positive way doesn't mean that she doesn't have values that she'll stand for, and she won't take shit. She'll hold Dennis to telling him. So it was nice to kind of be the counterpoint of their their grief and loneliness, I guess, and her lightness.
There's a great scene, which is the kind of uncomfortable double date, where they're playing a game of true or false, and Dennis at one point says, the trick is to say something that's emotionally true but factually false, which, you know, begins to explain how he's able to rationalize this whole ruse throughout. And it's also a turning point because that's when the relationship is really confirmed under the table. You hold hands, and you know it starts to really
any sort of score until the title sequence, which for me, score is inherently an emotional manipulation, so we wanted to really just sort of live in, I guess, the sobering grief of Roman's perspective in the opening act, and then sort of introduce like Jael's swelling score with the titles. So we did a lot of like both overt and I guess maybe more nuanced versions of trying to explore like this theme of truthfulness. And I guess I do believe that try to, in terms of like modulating the tonality of the film, that to be able to root for Dennis, you have to understand that even if he's making questionable decisions, that it's not coming from a malicious intent, that it's coming from a place of yearning and looking for intimacy and connection, which he finds unexpectedly in Roman's sort of odd couple. Yeah, I guess that's sort of what Roman is parsing out materially in that last scene. It's like, what parts of this friendship were real, because he's so gobsmacked, but he also has so much like emotional investment in his friendship.
For much of the film, I felt that Dennis was like this unhinged creep, like a liar, but he's terribly lonely. And then interestingly, he confesses early on that he gets close to confessing that he's responsible for Rocky's death early on in the conversation. They're talking about the worst thing you've ever done. But then apparently he kind of pivots to the last moment and he becomes like he's responsible for his own imaginary twin's death to the support group. But you can tell at that point that he's feeling very guilty about where this is all going. And he's not a bad guy, he's just getting drawn into this. And he can also have the sense that he's making a difference. I feel like they're both coming through trauma, and growing together as a result. So yeah, well done. I was talking to your director of photography who came along this evening here. I think he's in the audience.
Shout out to Greg.
It's beautifully shot, and I appreciate how the city of Portland kind of is this character in the background to some extent. It's really nicely done. So that's pretty much all I got. I mean, congratulations. Do you have any comments or thoughts from the
Yeah, I was make a request because Aisling flew here all the way from London. If you have a great Marcy question, raise your hand.
Yeah, I have a Marcy question. What's your question?
Who's
Out of
asking?
the 50 minutes that you said you cut, which deleted scene was the saddest for all of you to let go of?
Oh, that's good.
There was a flashback sequence of both young Roman and young Dennis. Personally, I miss young Dennis. He was such a good little actor. Where he was also like a dancer, and it was like in front of a mirror, and he just took direction really well, and he was saying the it takes two quote dialogue, and that was sort of like the start of the perspective scenes.
He looked a little too much like young Roman Rocky.
That was the problem.
Yeah.
People thought it was the same kid. Had to drop him.
Anyone else? I can do the roaming microphone if you need. Can you speak up, yes, sir? Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Sorry.
For Marcy, why do you think she put up with the attitude that Dennis was, because she's a social butterfly, so she obviously understood that he was being a little bit passive aggressive. So why do you think she as a character put up with that?
I think she's incredibly empathetic, and I think probably all have people in our life that maybe aren't our favorite people, but we know that they just need someone, honestly, they just need someone to be nice to, be their best friend, but she's someone who can talk to in the office, and I think it's important for her to feel like the people she's interacting with, she's not making It's not a loser.
Yes, and so,
So I'll ask her first. Do you think Dean was real? He mentioned several times in the film that he thought he had another brother back in Japan, and his brother lived in Japan for a while. I'm just wondering, do you think that was something that was strictly, fantasy that he invented, or was there possibly threads there that, he existed, but you just never met him because he lived in, lived in Japan?
Marcy?
Yeah, what do you think she felt about that when
I think she was very confused. Because she would remember, she said they were both only children. And then, we see she's smart, she's taking her land back, but she doesn't want to close the kerfuffle before it needs to happen, so she gets her facts straight before breaking the news.
yes, right.
It's a great word.
When Marcy says pre-eye, was that improv or was that written? If it was written, how do you spell that?
No, we, originally the line was navy blue mini, but then the pussiest car I could find for Dennis was mini. So I didn't want to be them both the drag names. Sorry, no offense. And then that's actually their official plural for Prius. It's Prius. So I
Okay,
didn't do
like
that.
I've been saying it forever. I thought I made it up.
Oh, you've been saying it?
Yeah,
You say Priya?
I do. I've never written it though, so I don't know how to spell
Where
it.
did that come from?
My brain.
That you didn't answer the spelling part of the question.
I think it's just P-R-I-I.
Just keep that.
Somebody fact check it. Marcy.
Well, Twinless is in theaters this coming year. I'm just trying to. One thing is on your way out in a minute. There's this really cool promotion for the film.
Get our little marshmallows.
Two twin marshmallows. So it's on the table on your way.
Be careful who you eat first.
But thank you guys for joining.